In this next section, we're going to begin by talking about competitive analysis. Understanding who your competitors are and trying to understand what they're doing currently, perhaps what they've done in the past, and trying to determine what they're going to be doing in the future is something that we need to be aware of, or at least try to be aware of. So we need to do some sort of analysis of the competitive environment. There are a number of ways in which we can do competitive analysis. You have at your disposal in the course, in this course, as downloads, a number of different templates that you should use when you are doing your competitive analysis. I would suggest doing competitive analysis in a number of different ways and kind of triangulate to the truth. Meaning, by looking at different perspectives, we can get an overall understanding of what's going on. And as our analysis overlaps, we get closer and closer to the quote-unquote truth. These two methods, the first, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, called SWOT, and Michael Porter's 5 forces analysis, are the two predominant ways in which competitive analysis is done. There are lots of let's say the problems with that is that basically everybody that's been to business school since Michael Porter's book in 1980 has an understanding of these 5 forces. So whether or not it's good or not, if you don't provide this sort of analysis, people will ask you why. And the answer is that, it wasn't appropriate for our business. We did the analysis this sort of way. Okay. But people rarely have that confidence to do that. So most people just go along and do these two types of competitive analysis, and that's it. So it's important for you to understand what these two types of competitive analysis is. So let's move ahead. SWOT. It's very easy. See, this is the thing. In lots of the techniques, analysis techniques and descriptive techniques that I'm showing you are very straightforward. The problem is when I ask someone to do a SWOT analysis and they say, okay, I know what that is, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and they go along they go ahead and do it. Excuse me. Unfortunately, they leave things out, they forget it, their recollection is incomplete. So as a result, their analysis is incomplete. In other words, not good. In most cases, really bad. There's a very simple solution to this. Use the template. Use the questions. You don't get any extra points by keeping everything in your head. Use the material you have at your disposal. That's what an entrepreneur does. Uses the resources and tools that he or she has at their disposal. And you need to do that same thing. Okay? So, who are the competitors? What are the names? A summary of their products. Okay. Strengths and weaknesses. Strategies and objectives. And what are the opportunities and threats to these companies? Economic, innovative, environmental, governmental. Furthermore, what I would suggest is when you're looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the competitor, I would go even further. Okay, because many companies today are so diversified and are in many different markets and many different products that it doesn't really matter the strengths and weaknesses overall of the company, because most of their business might be in a different business unit. What we need to understand is what's the strengths and weaknesses of the product or the business unit that we're going to be directly competing against. If we're a software product, a product that we're competing with Microsoft, let's say. Microsoft is in the is just exiting the TV business, the cable business. It's in 10,000 different businesses, but we're not competing against them in 10,000 different businesses. We're only competing against them in one. So yes, their strength is important, their overall strength is important, but what we care about is what's their strength in this little product that we are competing against them with. Okay. So if you do this on a routinized manner, okay, step 1, question 1. Step 2, question 2. You're less likely to miss something, and your analysis should be more complete. Again, with Porter's 5 forces, you have a couple of good readings and templates that will give you the exact details of this analysis that will help guide you through this analysis. But the 5 forces are threat of new entry, bargaining power of suppliers, threats from substitute products or services, bargaining power of buyers, and the rivalry among existing firms. Now, Porter had been schooled in industrial economics, which is looking at the structure of industries. And was looking at why are some industries more profitable than other industries. And he developed this framework. And by looking at this framework, was able to determine what industries are more profitable than others, and also as a result came up with some so-called generic strategies that we'll talk about in a second. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Okay, this is the picture of the 5 forces that it's drawn basically like this all the time. Some more detail, some less detail, but this is it. Okay, these are the 5 forces. Now, I want to come back to this. I want to come back to this point: barriers to entry, overall barriers to entry. No, let's deal with it now. This idea of barriers to entry is also, ultimately, as we looked in the 5 forces here, it's about the structure of the industry, and part of this, okay, is how difficult is it for us to enter this market profitably. And that's related in large part to these barriers to entry. Now, barriers to entry it's a dual-edged sword. So first, what is a barrier to entry? Barrier to entry is something, some condition, some situation that impacts our ability to enter the market, that makes it more difficult for us to enter the market. Now, that's not good for us because we want to be in this business. So we would like to enter the market. So if there are lots of barriers or high barriers, that's not helpful to us. But let's assume that we are in this industry. We were successful in getting in. Now, we want high barriers. Why? Because if barriers are high, then it's less likely additional competitors will enter the market. The more competitors in the industry, the more competitive the industry is, the lower our profits will be. Okay, and of course, in the extreme, the barriers to entry are so high that there's only one entrant in the business, us, and we're a monopoly. That's, of course, in the extreme case. So we would like to have barriers to entry be high when we're in, but low when we're about to get in. So here are just a couple of different ideas that you should chew on with respect to barriers to entry. Okay, absolute cost advantage. If there's if one of the competitors has an absolute cost advantage, that's a significant barrier to entry, because you could enter, but you're not necessarily going to be able to last, because he will always have a better cost situation than you. Let's look at access to inputs. That's a good one. Okay, maybe there's limited access to inputs. That's a barrier. Government policy. Maybe it's the TV business where you need a license, or other businesses that need a license. You want to operate a bar, but there are licensing requirements. It's a barrier to entry. Economies of scale. Okay, economies of scale is where the volume of production is inversely related to the cost. So the more you produce, the lower your costs. So when you're first starting out, your volume is going to be very low. You're going to have an absolute cost disadvantage, while the competitors are going to have a cost advantage. That's a barrier to entry. Capital requirements. Let's say it's the steel business. It costs quite a bit of money to start a steel plant. Brand identity. This is one that's used very often and not really seen often as a barrier to entry. But in many respects these days, in the world of the internet, it's about brand identity. You can have a product and service that's identical or even superior, but you don't have that brand, and so that's enough to keep you out of the business. Customer switching costs, for example. We briefly touched upon this in the previous lecture, but in different sorts of terms. Excuse me. Switching cost is that if I'm using product A and I want to use product B now, that there's a cost for me to switch. Maybe I have a contract with the company producing A, okay, a long-term contract, or maybe I have lots of investment in software for company A, or hardware for company A, or maybe I have lots of education with the system for company A. Those are high switching. I just can't switch to B because I'll lose all of that experience. I'll lose all of that investment. So we oftentimes want to lock a customer in by having really high switching costs. So if we have high switching costs, you can enter the market, but you're not going to get any customers because the switching costs are too high. So, why enter that particular market? Access to distribution supply channels. Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting, a quick story here. McDonald's came out with a chicken product, and it's called Chicken McNuggets, which they still sell, although they changed the recipe. In the early days, Chicken McNuggets were made out of it was a pressed thigh meat and mostly and skin and other parts. So it was very high fat, very juicy, and also very tasty. Okay, when they introduced the product, it was a big success. So Burger King is the number 2, at least at that time. It has now slipped to number 3, but number 2 hamburger chain. So if the market leader McDonald's comes out with a chicken product, then you would expect that Burger King would as well. So Burger King went to their food lab, and they developed a technically superior product called chicken tenders, which instead of having a pressed product, they actually had slivers of white breast meat that were lightly battered and fried. So they were gearing up to introduce chicken tenders. So they built this huge national marketing campaign, TV, magazines, radio, the whole shebang. So they launched the product with a lot of fanfare. What do you think happened? Was it a success or was it a failure? What do you think? Well, it actually was a huge success. Huge success. So much so that they ran out of chicken. They had to be resupplied. So they called up their chicken supplier and said, "Hey, look, we need some more chicken." And they said, "We can't supply you anymore. We're all tapped out. But you need to call chicken supplier B." So they called chicken supplier B, and chicken supplier B said, "Wow, congratulations on that launch. But we can't sell you any chicken." I said, "Why?" "Because we're under contract with McDonald's. Why don't you try chicken supplier C?" So went to chicken supplier C. "Congratulations on the launch, but we can't sell you any chicken. We're under contract with McDonald's." So what McDonald's did was locked up the source of supply. So the fact that the Burger King had this huge success and needed supply, and they couldn't get it, caused a big problem. All of this marketing, all of this attention, and they had to stop selling chicken tenders. And so they were drawing people into Burger King. People were coming in and say, "Hey, I'd like to have some chicken tenders." "Oh, sorry, we don't have any." Creating significant disappointment among customers. Okay, and what happened was they took chicken tenders off the market, and they really never recovered. They have chicken on the menu now. They tried different chicken things, but this competitor to Chicken McNuggets never really recovered. There are some other examples of that, but that was interesting how they locked up the source of supply, creating really a barrier to entry. Okay. I'm going to talk about the Micro Five Forces, but let's do that in the next lecture.